Welcome to another episode of Bridge from the Past, Art Across U.S. History. I'm Mary, and this series is for students like you to get ahead in your U.S. history class just by looking at pictures. Because believe it or not, historical images have a lot to say. Today, we're looking at two political cartoons on the Cuban Missile Crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis is the classic example of brinkmanship, or willingness to go to the brink or the very edge of war, kind of like a staring contest. But this staring contest could have started a nuclear war. On the surface, this was just one of many showdowns between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But it makes me wonder, was the Cold War really World War III? Let's jump in and find out. Before we look at our political cartoons, we need a little bit of context, and I'm going to do that with a super short timeline. We always have to look at a historical image, text, whatever, in the context from which it comes. So first of all, the Cuban Missile Crisis is going to take place in the context of the Cold War, as I said before. So the Cold War is this rivalry for world dominance between the United States and the Soviet Union that really starts as World War II is ending. So by the late 1950s, 1960s, 1962, when our crisis is going to take place, it's been going on for a while. And it's the United States and the Soviet Union are the two major players in this conflict, but other countries throughout the world are kind of going to have to pick a side. It's going to be very hard to stay neutral. So keep that in mind as we look at our images. So in 1959, Cuba has a revolution and Fidel Castro, a communist, comes to power. Now, the United States, of course, doesn't like the idea of communism. The Soviet Union is communism. And in 1961, the CIA actually launches a counter-revolution called the Bay of Pigs, and it is a complete failure. So there's definitely no love between Cuba and the United States. In 1962, in October of 1962, an American spy plane catches images of medium-range ballistic missiles, MRBM, if you're not up on your missile lingo, being built on the island of Cuba. So Cuba is only 90 miles from the coast of Florida. So any missile that's launched from Cuba could easily hit major cities on the US eastern seaboard. So this is a huge deal. Both the United States and the Soviet Union at this point have nuclear capabilities. So when President John F. Kennedy meets with his Security Council and his defense team on October 16th, he's basically given three options. We can try diplomacy with Castro and Khrushchev, who's the premier, the leader of the Soviet Union at this time. We can do a naval quarantine around the island of Cuba to make sure no missiles or any accompanying materials come or go from the island. Or we can do an air attack of the missile sites. So again, both the United States and the Soviet Union and Cuba now have this capability for nuclear weapons. So he doesn't want to launch an attack. He doesn't want that, loss of life. So we're going to go with option two, and we're careful to call it a quarantine because if it was a blockade, technically that's an act of war. On October 22nd, things are getting even more tense. The president addresses the country on TV, and he says there is, quote, unmistakable evidence of a missile threat on the island of Cuba, and he calls on Khrushchev to take down missiles. Now you have several days of back and forth between JFK and Khrushchev over what's going to happen, and on the 28th, Khrushchev agrees to dismantle the missiles. So the crisis is diffused. But how close did we get to nuclear war? Let's take a look at our images. So this is our first cartoon, and this actually appeared in the Daily Mail, which is a British paper, and it is by a Welsh cartoonist, Leslie Illingsworth. So right away, what strikes me about this cartoon is that I've got JFK on one side and I've got Khrushchev on the other, and it's pretty obvious who they are. It looks like JFK, it looks like Khrushchev. It doesn't really seem to be a caricature of either man. And they are arm wrestling. And I can see the energy radiating off of their arms. Like they're really struggling to see, who's going to win. And they're both sweating. So they both have, they're exerting themselves in this contest. So I said that brinkmanship is this willingness to go to the very edge, or like a staring contest, or you could also think of it as an arm wrestling match where you're really struggling to see, who's going to come out on top. And in this image right here, they seem to be deadlocked in the center. So it's not clear who is going to win. The other thing I immediately noticed is that both men are sitting on a missile. And I know that these missiles can carry nuclear weapons. So the stakes of this arm wrestling contest are quite high. And the other thing that's really interesting about this image is both Khrushchev and Kennedy have their fingers just inches away from the detonator button to launch these missiles. So the stakes are really high. This cartoon was published on October 29th, 1962. So this was just one day after Khrushchev agreed to remove all of the missiles. So the crisis has been diffused by this point. What this cartoon shows me is that the threat that, nuclear annihilation, we're this close from it, is still like very much palpable. And it's not just the United States and the Soviet Union and Cuba that's like experiencing this. People in Great Britain, and I would assume other countries, are watching this too. Here's our second cartoon. So this cartoon appeared on October 30th, so the following day from our previous cartoon, also just 2 days now after Khrushchev agrees to dismantle the missiles. And it is from an American paper. And it says, "This hurts me more than it hurts you," is what it's captioned. And again, I have Khrushchev. I don't have JFK, but I do have Castro. And both of these men are, I would say, kind of grotesque, right? Now, Khrushchev looks pretty sinister, and Castro definitely looks sinister. He's got these massive fang-like teeth, but it looks like these teeth are actually missiles. So Khrushchev is going to pull the missiles from Castro with these pliers, and he's saying it's going to hurt me more than it hurts you. So this is really interesting. Again, Cuba's sort of caught in the crossfire in a way between the United States and the Soviet Union. So it's Khrushchev that was losing face, according to this artist, because he has to back down. He has to remove the missiles. And again, you have this really awful way to pull a tooth, even with modern dentistry, is a pretty awful thing. So he is just taking a plier and going to yank them out. So it's almost this bloody, gory, awful sort of thought that the artist is using to compare dismantling missiles and dentistry. But it's almost as, this is more, I would say, like he's gloating. Like, you backed down, Khrushchev, you look bad, you have to pull your missiles. So clearly this was a win for the United States. So here we have the two images side by side. So again, you have this idea, this exertion of the two men. We're so close to a horrible catastrophe versus focusing more on Khrushchev backing down and removing the missiles. So this is the same event, but you have two artists in two different places and giving it their own sort of spin. So it's interesting and worth remembering that different people can view or depict an event in very different ways. So now I'm going to toss it back out to you with my original question. We think of the Cold War, we think United States versus the Soviet Union. Is that fair, or should we broaden what we call the Cold War to World War III? I would really like to know what you think. You can let me know by leaving a comment below. That's all we have time for on today's episode. If you like this video, if you learned something, please like it, subscribe to our channel. We're back with a new primary source every other Thursday. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all the places. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love for you to get involved with us. So until next time, take care.